Thanks for joining me on episode 1010 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Matthew Deibler. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to focus on the calling of God is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
Because the truth is, how you handle your time and how you handle your money is really all about how you handle yourself, how you handle the choices you make, the behavior you allow, how you change. That is what makes the change in your time and your money. And that's what changes your life.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about developing your influence through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about how we often lie to ourselves about our money. I share an exercise you can do so that you can see the truth, and I also talk about why it's hard to be honest, but it's the first step in improving your money. As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon. Earlier this week, I talked about lying to ourselves about our time, and now I'm going to talk about lying to ourselves about our money. Because the truth is, just we'll say that we don't have enough time to do the things that we really want to do. We don't have enough time to work on the things that we really want to work on. We often use the excuse that we don't have enough money as well. We don't have enough money to get everything that we want. And you know what? That's actually the truth. You never have enough money to do everything. But usually you can find a way to get to a point where you have enough money to do almost anything that you really are called to do. But you only do that by giving up spending money on the things that you don't want to do, that aren't in alignment. Again, I've worked with literally hundreds of clients now on their money. And in every single case, usually they've got debt, they've got other things that are going on. They feel like they just make too much money to be this broke all the time. And whether they make $35,000 a year or $350,000 a year, they feel desperate because they just don't feel like they have enough money to do everything they want to do. But then when they begin to examine it and look for alignment and look, where am I spending my money? Where am I spending my energy on doing things? They begin to discover that there's things that currently they're spending money on that really and truly aren't that important to them. That's the first step, by the way. You need to track your spending for a period of time, usually a month or more. I recommend, if possible, for about 3 months, and figure out, write down everywhere you're spending your money, whether it's cash, whether it's check, whether it's on a credit card, doesn't matter. Where is your money going? Because until you know where it's going, it's hard to know again what's in alignment, what's actually spending money on the things that you really want, and what's actually spending money on things that at the end of the day, you look at it and you go, this isn't important to me. It's why I can't look at anyone's budget and say, don't spend money there. That's ridiculous. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter what I think is ridiculous for your money. What matters is what you discover is ridiculous. Now, again, I'm not saying that if you make $35,000 a year, that it's going to be easy and you're going to immediately buy a big house and get out of debt and drive a new car and all of these things. No, you always have choices. There's always an opportunity cost. If you do one thing with something, then you can't do something else with it. If you spend $1 one way, you can't spend that same dollar a different way. But knowing where you're spending your money, knowing what you're doing with your money becomes important, because then you'll discover patterns again. You'll discover places that you're doing things that at the end of the day, you're like, why am I doing this? I'm spending this much money on this, and this isn't really important to me. By the way, this isn't the same as you've heard financial people talk about the quote latte factor. If you stop drinking Starbucks coffee every day, that's $5. That's what I call Starbucks. You'll go into and you take that $5 and you invest it. Now you'll be a multi-millionaire by the time you retire and yada, yada. That's true to some extent, but it's also completely false. And here's what I mean. If that $5 Starbucks every single day is something that brings you great pleasure and it's something that you want to spend your money on, that's fine. Do it. But recognize by doing that, you got to make a choice somewhere else to balance that. You can't just live in the present and sacrifice the future. But by the same token, you can't sacrifice the present for the future either. You can't need to give those up in both places. You've got to have balance in your life. You've got to both live today and prepare and plan for the future and be ready for that as well. It's again a both and moment. It's about living for today and the future at the same time. But you can do that once you start seeing the patterns. What's interesting is once people start tracking their money and making a plan and putting a budget in place, almost inevitably, some of the things that at first glance seem like a no-brainer, seem like something they couldn't give up, becomes easy to give up. Not because they're saying no, but because they're saying yes to something that's more important, something that's a bigger goal, something that's getting them more of what they want. More time sometimes, more freedom, the ability to make choices that they weren't able to make before. It's amazing how this happens. It happens with our time. It happens with our money, because the truth is how you handle your time and how you handle your money is really all about how you handle yourself, how you handle the choices you make, the behavior you allow, how you change that is what makes the change in your time and your money. And that's what changes your life. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.